Music Symposium. This year, the symposium is entitled Ernest Bloch, Ambler through the Redwoods, Agate Beach Rockhound. My name is Shauna Keyes, and I'm a cellist with the Newport Symphony. I also work as their office manager and bookkeeper. And I am the current flame keeper of the Ernest Bloch Legacy Committee. This committee is a group of volunteers who have the mission of the Ernest Bloch Legacy Committee is to preserve the legacy of the world-renowned composer Ernest Bloch and to keep it alive and well here in Newport, because he lived here with his wife Marguerite the last 18 years of his life over on Agate Beach. Now, the Ernest Bloch Legacy Committee originally formed in 1989. It was the brainchild of David Ogden Stiers and Tony Amore and a group of their friends. And they, in 1989, formed two nonprofits. They thought, you know what the Oregon Central Coast needs? A symphony orchestra and a summer festival to honor Ernest Bloch. And so that's what they did. And it was the Yaquina Chamber Orchestra was formed, and the Ernest Bloch Music Festival was formed. Now, as far as what the audience would see for both of these groups, it was basically the same musicians, but the board of directors was slightly different. The Ernest Bloch Music Festival included members of the family. At that time, all three children of Ernest and Marguerite were living. So it was Yvonne, Lucienne, and Suzanne were all very active in the beginning. Two of the grandchildren, Ernie Bloch II and his wife Ellen, were very, very much active. And another grandchild, Sita, was involved. Also, at that time, the enthusiasm was very high, and there was an honorary board that included Leonard Bernstein, who is the friend of Suzanne, and Yehudi Menuhin, a famous violinist who is friends with Ernest Bloch, and Maren Alsop, who happened to be the music director of the Eugene Symphony at that time. I've gotten a lot of questions already, so here we go. I'm going to answer everybody's questions. Over the course of the 37 years since this happened, the Yaquina Chamber Orchestra expanded to the Yaquina Orchestra. And the Ernest Bloch Music Festival started as a week-long festival. There were 3 orchestra concerts, chamber recitals, a composer symposium, lots of parties. It was a big deal, right? And then it sort of dwindled down because the children eventually passed away. The grandchildren either passed away or retired. Ellen moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And so it got harder and harder to keep it going for a whole week. And so then it became just one weekend, and then one day, and now it's one afternoon. At the time that it became one afternoon, they decided to merge the two nonprofits and become one nonprofit called the Bay Music Association. Bay refers to, of course, the beautiful Yaquina Bay, but it also is an acronym for Bloch and Yaquina Music Association. Then the Bay Music Association transformed into the Newport Symphony, and the Ernest Bloch Music Festival became the Legacy Committee, which is now, for about 3 years approximately, has been incorporated under the auspices of the Lincoln County Historical Society. And so they have a permanent display of Ernest Bloch over in the Burroughs Museum near the hospital. And we get to have this beautiful venue to do our symposium every summer. So it's wonderful. I do want to give a shout out to the people who have been involved since 1989. So we have Alexander Knapp, who you will be hearing from via video. He lives in London, England. He has been here many times, but he couldn't come this summer. A shout out to Greg Steinke, who I know I saw over there. He's been here since the beginning. Yay, Greg! And I was looking for Paul Charlotte Denault, I see back there. Hi, Charlotte. And of course, my mother, Sandy Rumagoo, over there. So at this time, it's the group of volunteers and the family that is now involved are the great-grandchildren. So we have Lucienne Allen and Suzanne Boyer, who are also part of the committee, and we thank them for their enthusiasm and participation.
You mentioned Frank Kellner.
And this is an invitation. If any of you would like to join us, the more the merrier. We'll be happy to have you join the committee. So last year, I decided to have the theme be not only Ernest Bloch's music, but something about his personality and his family. So I chose his love of hunting wild mushrooms and his daughter Lucienne's mural career as a muralist and her friendship with Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, because I thought that was so interesting. Well, this year I thought, you know what I find so fascinating about Ernest Bloch is his love, his deep love of nature, and specifically of trees and of agates. He was also a photographer, and there are many, many photographs of his where he just photographed trees. And after the program today, you'll see 2 posters of those photographs in the reception area. So you're welcome to have a look at those. And when he moved to the house that he and Marguerite lived in, it's over by the Aquiniquet Lighthouse, right behind Roby's Furniture. It was only a matter of time before he became obsessed with hunting agates, right? You just can't live above Agate Beach and not start collecting them. And so he became fascinated and started polishing them and made that part of his life. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to focus on that for this year's symposium. So I'll begin now with a story from Ernest Bloch's son, Ivan. In 1980, it was the 100-year anniversary of Bloch's birth. And Ellen had moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and so she invited her father-in-law to go to Charleston and give a talk sharing his memories of his father to the Piccolo Spoleto Festival. And I thought I would share with you a few paragraphs of his memories. My closeness with Father at first involved sharing his love of nature. Hikes, bicycling in the countryside, picnics, mushroom hunting, rather unsuccessful trout fishing in nearby small streams. We made many trips to the Salive near Geneva, Switzerland, sleeping in farmhouses or barns, eating the local bread and cheeses, and a finger of vin de paille in my glass of water. My father had so many fervent interests. I wonder where he found that enormous reservoir of energy, logic, dedication, and inspiration from which he was able to compose. It's plain baffling. Whenever he was not composing, corresponding, walking in the woods, or along the beach, or polishing agates, he would rest on the living room couch, pipe in one hand and a book in another. He would read and reread works of an extraordinarily varied nature. This almost feverish, but always organized, logical turmoil translated itself into conversation. He was virtually tireless, unstoppable, and endless. He wore out his listeners no matter how devoted. He was bursting with ideas, tirades on the mismanagement of the planet, and always questions on how society was organized and disorganized, whereas nature seemed to operate within a grand scheme. But when walking in the woods, looking for his favorite chanterelle spot, traversing dewy meadows, climbing the gentle slopes of the Oregon countryside or Switzerland, fishing in a quiet brook or lake. Then he was enveloped by a pervasive peace, which bathed those who happened to be with him. I cherish those moments when my father would stop to look at a flower, or a leaf, or a tree, in silent wonder and reverence. Then, he did not need to talk. He absorbed and renewed himself. At this time, I would like to welcome Shauna and Constance to the stage. They will be performing a piece called Meditation from two pieces for viola and piano. Ernest Bloch composed this in 1951 when he was living in Agate Beach. I met Shauna about 30 years ago when she joined the Eugene Symphony, and I met Constance, I think it was last October, when she was performing here on this very stage, and I recruited her to come back. So please welcome Shauna and Constance. You're making your audience nervous. So I am going to continue on now, and thank you so much, Jeff. You just got the touch. Thank you. Many of you in this room probably knew a woman named Peggy Raridan, and from what I've heard, she was a force of nature, and she was quite the personality. She happened to live in the same neighborhood as Ernest Bloch in the 1950s. In 1991, she was interviewed by the Newport Times, and this was for the festival, and so they interviewed her and her memories of living nearby. And this is what she said. This is 1991. Bloch Festival honors former Newport resident. The old man walks quietly down the beach, his black cape flowing in the ocean breeze. Occasionally, he stops to stir the sand with his walking stick, looking for one more agate for his bountiful collection. The children race toward the figure in black and quietly fall into step with the man who speaks English differently from them. It begins to rain, and Ernest Bloch spreads his cape out. Without a word, the children gather like little chicks around their parent. He guides them up the stairs to his home, where his wife Marguerite waits in the kitchen with the most delicious spicy cookies. Peggy Raridan is reminiscing about her teenage years in Newport during the 1950s. She said, "You always knew when you could talk to him because his cape was blowing in the breeze. But if he pulled that cape tightly around his body, or if he was sitting on a big log thinking, you knew not to bother him." And Ellen, the wife of Ernie II, who moved to Charleston, she donated that black cape to the museum here. So we actually have that, I think, in the Burroughs house. In the same press release, they interviewed Sita, who was a granddaughter of Ernest Bloch, and this is what she remembers. Sita Dmitra Milichev remembers that her grandfather would compose each afternoon in the studio above the garage on a large black Steinway grand piano. In the late afternoons, when they did not go to the beach looking for agates or to the woods to hunt for wild mushrooms, she and her grandfather would go to his agate room. He carefully held each stone with sealing wax, sometimes taking 2 days to polish one rock. He would only polish one side, saying that one could see what nature had polished in the sea, and what the stone's soul was on the other finely polished side. And now I would like to introduce Sita's daughter, Lucienne Allen, who I was so thrilled when she said she could come. She gave a wonderful presentation of the Bloch family last year, and I said, could you come back and do that again? And she agreed, and I'm so delighted. So please welcome Lucienne Allen.
Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I might repeat a couple things that have been said today a little bit differently, but all the stories have just been told so many times that they all continue to grow in my mind. That beautiful music gives us a glimpse of Ernest Bloch the composer. And now let's turn our attention to Ernest Bloch the man. I'm here as his great-granddaughter, and what I can offer today is not a musicological analysis. What I can offer is the family Bloch, the intense child, the devoted and sometimes difficult artist and father, the grandfather, photographer, agate and mushroom hunter, philosopher, humanist, and the man who made Agate Beach his final home. The title of today's symposium, Ernest Bloch, Ambler Through the Redwoods, Agate Beach Rockhound, gives us a wonderfully intimate way to approach him, not only as the famous composer, but as a man walking through trees, searching for agates, listening to the sea, and trying in every possible way to understand the world around him. So I want to go back to before Agate Beach, before America, before the public career, to the family Ernest came from. These are his parents, Maurice and Sophie Bloch. Ernest's father was born Meyer Bloch, a German Jewish merchant who, after settling in Geneva, adapted to his French-speaking surroundings and became Maurice. It was a practical change, but Maurice himself seems to have been anything but practical. At the age of 40, Maurice married Sophie Braunschweig, a warm and sociable woman nearly 17 years his junior. By all accounts, she brought a sense of lightness to a home that wasn't always an easy one. Together, Maurice and Sophie ran a successful shop selling Swiss souvenirs and tourist gifts, folk wood carvings, reproductions of objets d'art, metalwork, jewelry, stones from the Alps, music boxes, cuckoo clocks, handbags, and fine leather goods. It was a lively place and visual, with 10 employees and a constant stream of visitors. Maurice and Sophie had 3 children, Arnold, Louise, and Ernest. Arnold was bright and full of promise, and his parents placed great hopes in him. But when he died of diphtheria at just over 4 years old, they were devastated. 2.5 years later, on July 24th, 1880, Ernest was born. Maurice and Sophie saw in him something of the child they had lost, and that mixture of grief, hope, fear, and love shaped the atmosphere of his entire life from the very beginning. Sophie became intensely protective of him. She could indulge him, and that may have encouraged some of the egocentricity that later became part of his character. Or for those interested in Eastern and Western astrology, it maybe was the fact that he was a Leo born in the year of the dragon. But from his mother, Ernest also absorbed optimism, serenity, and a deep spiritual sense. Maurice's nature was more tormented, and that too left its mark. From the very beginning, Ernest held contradictions. He could be explosive, then quiet and inward. He could be difficult and also deeply sensitive. He was intense, curious, and already searching for something beyond the visible world. As a child, he once asked his mother, "Who is God? Where is God? Does God have a shape?" And she told him that God had no shape, no form, that we cannot see God just as we cannot see air, but that God is in everything, everywhere, in the stars, in the trees, within us. That stayed with him. Even as a child, Ernest was reaching for something larger, something invisible but deeply present. That search became part of the heart of his music. Neither of Ernest's parents was musical, but his passion was impossible to ignore. He persuaded his father to let him learn the violin, and his progress was extraordinary. By the age of 11, he had already given a public recital in Geneva. As a child prodigy, it was clear music was his life's direction. By then, he had made a solemn vow to become a composer. He did not just whisper this to himself. He actually wrote it down, carried the note deep into the woods, buried it under a mound of stones, and built a bonfire over it. As a great-granddaughter of Bloch's, hearing the stories over the years, that is classic Ernest Bloch. Dramatic, private, symbolic, a little excessive, and completely sincere. Whether he saw music as a spiritual destiny or as a way to escape the more conventional life his parents imagined for him, or both, his path became clear. He studied in Geneva, Brussels, Frankfurt, Munich, and Paris. He trained as a violinist under Eugène Ysaÿe, but composition was always the language pulling him forward. Later in life, he was known for destroying early pieces that did not feel authentic to him. He held himself to almost impossible standards. Success mattered less to him than honesty. If the music wasn't true, it wasn't worth keeping. He wanted it to be genuine. That word, genuine, really matters with Bloch. He was not trying to write something merely impressive. He was trying to write something true. In 1904, Ernest married Marguerite Schneider, a German pianist. She was quiet, thoughtful, and somewhat reserved, a kind of steady presence that seemed to balance Ernest's intensity. By 1909, Ernest and Marguerite had 3 children, Yvonne, Suzanne, and Lucienne, my grandmother. Each of the children had a very distinct life and gift. Yvonne, the eldest and only son, shared with his father a love of the natural world, which included mushroom foraging and long hikes outdoors. He became an engineer and conservationist, eventually working for the Bonneville Power Administration in Portland, Oregon. And it's his granddaughter, Suzanne, that's here tonight, this afternoon. Suzanne loved music from an early age and became a pioneer, if not a trailblazer, in Renaissance music. She taught recorder, lute, and composition at Juilliard for more than 4 decades and co-founded the Lute Society of America. I still remember her teaching me recorder in my grandmother's kitchen when I was little. My great aunt was a bit intimidating for a 7-year-old, but she was enthusiastic with how quickly I was learning what she was teaching. And Lucienne, the youngest child, was the artist. She was bold, determined, and visually gifted. She worked in fresco murals, mosaic, sculpture in wood and glass, woodcut, lithography, children's book illustrations, egg tempera, and many more mediums. She was named after her godmother, Ernest's dear friend, the great soprano Lucienne Breval, who sang the lead in his opera Macbeth, which was dedicated to her. The Bloch family home was alive with music, art, debate, strong opinions, deep affection, grief, devotion, and plenty of laughter. Ernest had a very earthy sense of humor, and apparently it did not matter who was at the table, his jokes always made an impression. One of my grandmother's favorite stories about her father happened when she was young and the family was learning English. Ernest insisted the children speak only English so that they would learn it faster. One day, after correcting them once again for slipping into French, my grandmother looked up at him and said, "But Papa, you are speaking French." That was Lucienne, small, sharp, observant, and not easily intimidated. In 1917, the family moved from Switzerland to the United States, first to New York, then to Cleveland, where Bloch became the first musical director of the Cleveland Institute of Music. His ideas about musical education were broad and humane. Technique mattered, of course, but he believed education should also develop appreciation, judgment, taste, understanding, and love of music. In 1925, Bloch sent his 2 daughters, Suzanne and Lucienne, along with their mother to Paris to continue their studies in the arts. Suzanne studied with Nadia Boulanger. Lucienne studied sculpture with Antoine Bourdelle and painting with André Lotte at the Beaux-Arts. While those were her formal studies, her curiosity reached far beyond the classroom. During this time, she became dear friends with sculptor Beniamino Benny Buffano, letting him stay in her atelier in Paris. Meanwhile, Bloch moved to San Francisco, where he served as director of the Conservatory of Music for 5 years. San Francisco was a city that clearly fascinated him, judging by the photographs he left behind. It was another chapter in a life that carried him across continents, though he never stopped paying close attention to the landscapes around him. During that period, he composed America, an epic rhapsody, which won first prize in a national competition of more than 500 submissions. It premiered in 1928 in simultaneous performances in 5 American cities and was broadcast across the country. This sketch was made by Bloch's friend, the artist Maynard Dixon. In it, Cleveland is clearly the thorn in his side. New York is his rock, and San Francisco the nugget of gold. Bloch poured his hopes and conflicted love for his adopted country into that music. America was complicated for him. It represented promise, disappointment, contradiction, and possibility all at once. As with so much of his work, he was not interested in a decorative version of feeling. He wanted the struggle inside it. In 1930, Bloch returned to Europe to work on Avodat HaKodesh, or Sacred Service, one of his most ambitious spiritual works. It joined Hebrew liturgy with profound musical introspection. Bloch had to reconnect with his Jewish roots to write it. There was a large crucifix always present in the Bloch home. At the Agate Beach house, it had a prominent presence in the living room near the piano, the books, the fireplace, and the view of the Pacific. For Bloch, the crucifix did not represent a rejection of his Jewishness. It was deeply personal. He kept it because of a terrible betrayal by a close friend, a wound that never healed. In the figure of Christ, he saw not doctrine, but human suffering, the anguish of being abandoned, misunderstood, and betrayed, and still holding on to compassion. Helen Johnson Kintner, who was a student and personal secretary during his Agate Beach years, remembers that Bloch often said, "Christ was the only true Christian who ever lived." That gives you some sense of the scale of his spiritual imagination. He was not interested in softening the hard parts of being human. He was drawn to suffering, compassion, and the hope that human beings might become better than they are. Outside of his music, he was a relentless observer. He walked. He read philosophy. He copied long quotations into notebooks. He gathered mushrooms. He collected agates and books. He wrote thousands of letters. And he took photographs. A lot of photographs. After his death, a friend of the Bloch children, the photographer Ansel Adams, helped place thousands of Bloch's negatives at the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, Arizona. In a letter to Bloch's eldest, Yvonne, Adams wrote, "Any photographs you have or can find of your father have great value, especially in musical circles. If they are fine photographs showing creative spark, they should be considered." His many photographs include nature, family and friends. Here he is with San Francisco Conservatory of Music founders Lillian Hodghead and Ada Clement in Mill Valley, California. And I love the fact that they're all smoking pipe together. He took photographs of landscapes, trees, and rocks, and many self-portraits. In some ways, he was an early selfie master. He'd use a string and remote shutter to photograph himself long before the word selfie existed. But photography for Bloch was not just vanity, it was inquiry. He used the camera to study time, change, light, atmosphere, and the emotional presence of things. He would photograph the same tree in different seasons and different light, watching how it changed and how it remained itself. In a 1931 letter about photographing trees, he wrote a feeling that the soul of the trees was warming his heart and communing with him. He said he had become a tree, and that was a much better thing to be than a man. That is dramatic, yes, but Bloch was dramatic and also sincere, and it shows us how deeply he experienced the natural world. For a brief period in the 1920s, Bloch also experimented with painting. This was not a lifelong practice in the way music and photography were, but it came from the same relentless need to look closely. He was connected during that period with Galka Shire, the artist, dealer, and champion of modernism, who helped bring the work of Kandinsky, Klee, Feininger, and Jawlensky, known as the Blue Four, to American audiences. His own paintings are not great in the way his music is great, but I find them touching nonetheless. They show him trying another language. He was not the painter in the family. That was his youngest, my grandmother Lucienne, and her seriousness as an artist influenced him greatly. But Bloch painted this photograph. Okay, let's just start that over. Bloch painted this painting from memory when he was missing the Redwoods. In 1941, Ernest and Marguerite bought the only home they ever owned, here in Agate Beach. During Bloch's lifetime, Agate Beach was still its own place with its own post office. So when people called him the composer from Agate Beach, that was not just a poetic phrase, it was part of his identity. They would live the rest of their lives by the sea. Marguerite felt at home in the cool fog on the water, which reminded her of her childhood in Hamburg. Ernest loved the changing moods of the ocean and sky. The Agate Beach house was not only a composer's house, it was a family house. My grandparents visited often with their growing family, and everyone gathered there to celebrate, argue, eat, walk, collect, and laugh. My mother, Sita, who's in her 80s now, remembers the smell of Agate Beach. When she would walk with her grandfather down to the beach, she remembers the scent of cabbage roses and wet cedar. I love how that memory brings him out of the archives and into a living place. Not only the composer, not only the public figure, but the grandfather walking with the child towards the ocean. Marguerite was an excellent cook. Wild mushrooms gathered by the family often became soup, and at last year's event, Charmaine made an excellent version of the family recipe, which was served and enjoyed. Did a great job. And then there were the cats. The Bloch home was never without cats. Ernest would often feed his cat Grigri little pieces of cheese from the end of his knife. On the visits my mother would make with her mother up to Oregon from California, she remembers being allowed to go down into the cellar and choose the wine for the evening. Whatever bottle she brought back, Ernest would exclaim that it was the perfect choice. Agates were another part of daily life at the house. At Agate Beach, Bloch had an agate polishing machine in a little building next to the house below the room where he composed. After he polished the agates, he would bring them back to the house and hold them up by the window and study them by the light. If he did not like one, he simply threw it out the window. My mother remembers piles of rejected agates outside on the ground. Often he'd polish only one side of the agate. The rough side stayed rough. The polished side revealed the hidden color, depth, and light within. To him, that suggested something human. Like a person, the stone had a rough side, the real side, and a polished side, the side the world sees. That image feels like a key to Bloch himself. There was the public Bloch, the celebrated composer, the director, the teacher, the man whose work filled concert halls. And there was the rougher private Bloch, intense, searching, funny, stubborn, spiritual, sometimes difficult, and deeply alive. Agate Beach gave him a place where both sides could exist. He could compose, photograph, walk on the beach collecting agates, polish them, and study the light coming through them by the window. When we listen to his music, I think we often hear the same double nature. Bloch once said that music, as well as other arts, ought to be an integral part of our lives. Every human being, he believed, was entitled to sharing its beauty. He said it was of first importance to write good, genuine music, his music. That is what I hope you hear today, not only in the notes, but in the life around them. A boy burying his vow in the woods, a young artist searching for truth. A father accidentally scolding his children in French for speaking French. A photographer trying to become a tree. A grandfather walking through cabbage roses and damp cedars. A rockhound polishing one side of an agate and leaving the other side rough. That, to me, is Ernest Bloch. Not only the composer, sorry. Not only the composer, but the whole human being who never stopped searching. And here in Newport, near Agate Beach, we are closest to one of the places that truly helped him. Sorry.
Lucienne briefly mentioned that there was a woman named Helen Johnston Kittner. She was a composition student at the University of Oregon when Bloch moved to Agate Beach. She heard about him living nearby, and she wrote him a letter and said, "Can I take some private lessons with you?" He met with her, and he made a deal. He goes, "Look, if you are my personal secretary, I'll give you free lessons." And she accepted. So for 13 years, she was his personal secretary, all the way until his death. And much later, she wrote a book of her memories of her experience. And Paul Burkheiser gave this to me. Thank you, Paul. And it's a wonderful book. It has lots of wonderful photos and stories about her time with the Bloch family and with him as a teacher. So I thought I would just share a couple of little stories from this book. Ernest Bloch and I spent roughly 1 day per month polishing agates in his improvised rock shop. And as I observed the way he handled each agate, I was impressed at how carefully he avoided over-polishing or reshaping it beyond simply smoothing its grooves and surfaces. Nature knows best. Nature is the best designer, he explained repeatedly, and left it at that. The rock tumbler was emptied at the end of each cycle, and the best of these stones, Bloch saved for less discriminating friends and young people who valued them not so much for their polish and shape, but rather for the famous person who had polished and shaped them. A rare few of the other specimens were sliced and polished, then placed in small cedar cigar boxes with little metal clasps, and labeled by Bloch with the symbol XXX, which stood for the words extra special. To open one of these designated containers was to be dazzled with the beauty and perfection of their contents. And to be given one from Bloch's own hand was a rare and wonderful experience. And Lucienne did bring one of those cigar boxes, which is on display in the back if you'd like to have a look at the end of the program. Concerning a composition lesson, Helen wrote this. Ernest Bloch gave me a lesson on creating stress and resolution in musical work. On a later day, he was teaching me about repetition. explaining how the human mind needs a periodic return to the familiar in order to recognize and relate. On the one hand, constant repetition creates monotony that cannot maintain the listener's interest, he pointed out. We were sitting on the bench down on the trail behind his house, and to the left of us was a stark, wind-blown tree devoid of foliage. I had noticed it in passing numerous times before, but on this day, Bloch pointed out something unique about its form to make his point. He said, clearly, what we see is a tree, yes, but within that form is something very important. Many small branches projecting out from various points on the trunk and at random angles. The outer form of the tree is symmetrical, but within that frame are intricate designs revealing nature's artistry, curves, angles, and visual interest. Thus, we have a dimensional composition, a work of art that is easily identified as a tree, but not a dull post with branches wired on and attached at odd positions. The outer form is essential, exhibiting symmetry and good form, but without that inner design, it is less than a tree. The key is balance. At this point, I'd like to welcome back Shauna and Constance to play another work by Ernest Bloch, composed in 1951 while he lived on Agate Beach. It is the processional from the Suite Hebraïque for viola and piano. Lucienne was talking about how Ernest Bloch was a photographer, and the person who is one of the people who's in charge of all those photographs is Eric Johnson. He's part of the Ernest Bloch Legacy Committee. He lives in Tucson, Arizona, and he was going to come, but sometimes life doesn't work out. But I did find a quotation of Eric Johnson when the Oregonian did a full human interest story on Bloch's photography of trees. So I thought I would read just one quotation from Eric for this article in the Oregonian in 2011. Ernest Bloch turned to nature and photography for refuge, Johnson said. Bloch regarded photography as valid art and began to express his emotions about trees and nature with a Leica camera. Nature was Bloch's refuge, Johnson says. He got so wrapped up in trees, he would feel like he was communicating with them. He talks about the soul of trees. In a letter that Bloch wrote, he said he gets so emotional when he's around a tree that sometimes he lies down and cries. He would blend with nature. Bloch was working on sacred service, trying to reach a very deep and universal state. And he said that he himself became a tree. He was communing with nature with his camera. At this point, we have a video offered by Alexander Knapp, who lives in London, England. He has been here many times, but he was not able to come this time, so I believe that we will be seeing a YouTube of some sort, and he will be discussing the pieces that we are hearing today. Enjoy the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was with the greatest pleasure that I accepted Charmaine's kind invitation to talk about the chamber music being performed live during this afternoon's Bloch Symposium. I'm grateful for this opportunity to address you by video from London, UK, and I send you my warmest greetings across the miles. Today's music comprises two distinct groups of works by Bloch. The first consists of two separate pieces for viola and piano, written quite late in the composer's life. And the second is devoted to a single, much earlier composition for piano in 3 movements. Before discussing the first group, I'd like to offer a quick word about Bloch and the viola in general. Bloch wrote a copious quantity of chamber music, most of which included significant roles for the viola. 5 large-scale string quartets, several sets of shorter string quartet movements, and 2 piano quintets. However, the only works that he ever wrote involving the viola as a solo instrument were the Viola Suite of 1919, Concertina for flute, viola and piano or strings, 1948, Suite Hébraïque for viola or piano and piano or orchestra, 1951, Meditation and Processional for viola and piano of the same year, and the unfinished solo unaccompanied viola suite, 1958. Indeed, these 5 works demonstrate his deep love and affinity for this medium, and they have made a significant impact upon the development of the viola repertoire of the 20th century. The 2 pieces for viola and piano that we've been privileged to hear interpreted so eloquently by Shauna Keyes and Constance may appear to come from different groups. But in fact, they originated as movements from a single work entitled 5 Jewish Pieces for Viola and Piano. It was only subsequently that Bloch regrouped them into the three movements of Suite Hébraïque and, independently, two movements under the title Meditation and Processional. Here briefly is the background surrounding the genesis of these pieces. Bloch celebrated his 70th birthday in 1950. To commemorate this special occasion, a week-long Ernest Bloch Music Festival was organized in several prestigious venues in Chicago to include a wide range of Bloch's compositions, from the most intimate chamber music to orchestral works of the largest dimension, performed by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And there were also banquets and other festivities in the composer's honor. Bloch was completely overwhelmed by the musical excellence and celebrity status that he had experienced. He was determined to express his deep gratitude tangibly. And so, the very first work he wrote on his return home to Agate Beach was, in effect, his homage to Chicago, namely 5 Jewish pieces for viola and piano, later recorded as a long-playing disc by violist Milton Preeves, accompanied on the piano by Helene Brahm. Meditation, from Meditation and Processional, was completed in February 1951, published by Schirmer in 1954, and dedicated to Milton Preeves, the celebrated violist who had performed the Viola Suite of 1919 during the festival, to Bloch's enthusiastic approval. Meditation is a highly contrapuntal andante, incorporating canonic imitation. The opening chromatic theme on the viola alone suggests a D minor tonality. The full range of the viola can be heard here, from the lowest notes of the C string to the highest register on the A string. There is some evidence of Jewish modality, including intervals of the augmented second, as well as open fourths and fifths. But there seem to be no direct quotations from traditional melodies per se. Both movements, originally composed for viola and piano, were later treated to an orchestral arrangement by Francis Tourcy, sometime professor at Easton School of Music. Processional, the middle movement of Suite Hébraïque, was completed in March 1951. This processional should not be confused with the entirely different second movement of Meditation and Processional. And unlike Meditation and Processional, all three movements of Suite Hébraïque contain direct and conscious quotations from the Jewish liturgical tradition. How can we be so sure? Well, in about 1918, Bloch visited the New York Public Library several times to study almost all the melodies in the enormous 12-volume Jewish encyclopedia of 1901 to 1906. These he copied by hand into an 89-page unpublished notebook, which he entitled Chant Juif, Jewish Chants. And there is a precious document in Bloch's handwriting, originally in the possession of Suzanne Bloch, the composer's elder daughter, which she kindly shared with me when I was studying with her in New York in 1969. This single sheet lists the three movements of Suite Hébraïque, together with the names of the traditional melodies that Bloch found in the encyclopedia, and which he quoted in each respective movement. Processional contains two such melodies. The first, Kerubot, is a strophic hymn by the medieval Tiberian poet Khalil, and the second, Achot Ketana, apparently originated in the Greek city of Thessaloniki in 1533. The main theme, however, is Bloch's own, comprising motifs in the Phrygian mode above a 4-chord ostinato in the form of a slow march heard at the beginning and ending of the movement. Suite Hébraïque was published by Schirmer in 1953 and dedicated to the Covenant Club of Chicago, organizers of the Bloch Festival, and Milton Preeves and Helene Brahm gave its premiere in Chicago in March 1952. Nearly 3 decades separate the works for viola and piano of 1951, that we heard earlier, from the set of 3 pieces for piano solo of 1922, that we are to listen to shortly, namely Poems of the Sea, a cycle for piano. In her programmed sourcebook, entitled Ernest Bloch Creative Spirit, published in 1976, Suzanne Bloch wrote a highly evocative and characterful account of the environment in which the Poems of the Sea were conceived. I'd like to quote a few excerpts to give you a flavour. During the summer of 1921, before moving from New York to Cleveland, Bloch took his family for a vacation to the little village of Percé at the edge of the Gaspésie Peninsula in Quebec, Canada. There were no automobile roads. One came by a slow rural train that at times stopped to shoo off a cow that blocked the tracks. There was only one hotel. This was ideal for the Blochs, who hated resorts and crowds. The little fishing village was picturesque, with the sort of natives that delighted Bloch, who always liked the simple people close to the soil. Old seamen who spoke in a hard-to-understand French, full of 16th century expressions, liked to talk to this strange, sympathetic man who seemed to be so interested in their lives. He met some remarkable people among the visitors, one being Monseigneur Gautier, Archbishop of Montreal, with whom he paced the beach singing together in full voice, Gregorian chant. During his solitary walks on the Percé beaches, Bloch began to think of music, which he jotted down in a little book. The following year in Cleveland, 1922, he composed these 3 pieces, Waves, Shanty, at Sea. He was able to give a special tang in them of these cooler northern seas, of a Brittany, an Ireland, of the old-time sailors who settled the American eastern coast. Bloch prefaced these pieces with a poem quotation from Walt Whitman, the American poet he admired. End of quotation. We look forward to listening to Constance Jackson reciting this beautiful poem in cabin ships at sea, and then playing the piano cycle. Bloch wrote several impressionistic compositions for piano, either self-standing or in groups, during his years as founder director of the Cleveland Institute of Music, 1920 to 25. This set, lasting altogether about 11 minutes, is probably the best known. The melodic and harmonic styles are a blend of tonality and modality, fresh and uncomplicated. As with Bloch's music in general, programmatic and descriptive elements in the music are closely intertwined with a powerful emotional response. Waves begins with an oscillating ostinato, which characterizes much of the movement. There is a contrasting middle section comprising slow-moving chords. In addition to occasional subtle references to traditional cantorial modalities, there is a noticeable similarity between the first theme in this movement and the opening motifs of Supplication, the second movement of Bloch's cello and piano work From Jewish Life, dating from 1924. Indeed, it is possible to find numerous instances in his music as a whole where he quotes thematic material from one work to another, sometimes deliberately, sometimes subconsciously. The second movement, Shanty, perhaps a little melancholy in mood, is in the style of a folk song. The first and last sections are in the Dorian mode, whereas the middle part is in the major key. You may care to listen out for the Scotch snap, accented short note followed by a long note, one of Bloch's favourite and most recognizable rhythmical devices. The last movement, At Sea, is the longest of the 3. The outer sections take the form of a rollicking hornpipe, whereas the central episode comprises a series of dramatic chords which return briefly at the very end. Here again, we find passages of tonality and modality, mainly Dorian and Lydian, and the occasional Scotch span. Bloch completed this work on July the 11th, 1922, exactly 104 years ago to the day. It was published by Schirmer's in 1923, and the first performance was given in New York in November 1924 by Harold Bauer. There is also a version by Bloch for full symphony orchestra. Let us look forward with anticipation to the sesquicentennial of Bloch's birth in 2030. What a celebration year that will be, in Newport and in so many other locations throughout the world. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
At last year's reception at the symposium, I was eating Marguerite's delicious mushroom soup, and I was talking with Lucienne and said, I'm going to be going on vacation to the Redwood Forest in next week. And she was like, oh, that's nice. And Frank Geltner happened to be listening in, and he goes, oh, you're going to the Redwoods? You should find the Ernest Bloch Memorial Bench and take a selfie. And I was like, great, well, where is it? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you know, the Redwoods are kind of big, you know? So Lucienne was like, oh, it's in Prairie Creek State Park. And I was like, oh, wow, I mean, State Park, how big can it be? I'm sure I can find it. That's like a great adventure, I'll do it. Well, I went online and Googled, you know, Ernest Bloch Memorial Bench, Prairie Creek State Park, and I found nothing except for Alexander Knapp, the gentleman we just heard from, his story of opening up the ceremony for this bench. And the children and grandchildren of Ernest Bloch and Marguerite Bloch, they purchased 10 acres of Prairie Creek State Park. And it was a program where it was open to the public to purchase acreage as long as the stipulation was is that you do not develop on it and do not put any structures. And this was a program of the Save the Redwood Forest volunteer group. And so they did that. They purchased 10 acres and put this beautiful bench with a plaque on it. And Alexander actually was part of the opening ceremonies back in 1969 and wrote this little story about it. So I thought I'd share it with you because I thought it was just marvelous. Oric boomed the driver as he brought his Greyhound bus to a halt. A brief flurry of activity as we collected together our belongings, a headlong dash along the length of the bus, a precipitous leap down the steps, and finally the luxury of being able to stretch our legs once more. For 8 soporific hours, Suzanne Bloch, her son Matthew, and I had been traveling south along Highway 101 from Portland, Oregon. Now, at last, while ambling gently to the nearby motel, we could savor the clean, cool air of a mellow Northern Californian evening. We had not been installed more than a matter of minutes when, to the delight of all, Suzanne's younger son, Anthony, entered the scene, having just hitchhiked 340 miles north from San Francisco. The next morning, we were driven by car 6 miles north to the campsite situated near the headquarters of Prairie Creek, Redwood State Park. There, family and friends had gathered with one spirit, with one intention, to honor the memory of Ernest and Marguerite Bloch. Pilgrims from all parts of the United States and beyond, enthusiasts of all ages, devotees from all walks of life, everyone contributed to the dynamic character of the community. At the appointed hour, we proceeded to the outdoor clearing in the giant Redwoods, where Colin Hampton, president of the Ernest Bloch Society, officially opened the commemorations. After informal, scintillating talks by Lucienne and Suzanne Bloch, designed to engender a festive rather than somber mood for the occasion, we were privileged to hear two compositions by Ernest Bloch performed by Bonnie Hampton on solo cello, the Suite No. 1 and Meditation Hébraïque, followed by a tape recording of the Griller Quartet playing the first three movements of his String Quartet No. 1. It was a powerful experience to listen to these works in such a peace and tranquility. Spiritually refreshed, we then took the Irvine Trail, a 4.5-mile hiking path to the Pacific Ocean, which would eventually bring us to the Memorial Grove dedicated to Ernest and Marguerite Bloch. It was an extraordinary hike. The magnificence of the Redwoods, to be seen, to be believed. The fragrant aroma of the undergrowth through which we wended our way, quite overwhelming for a wide-eyed, hitherto uninitiated Englishman like myself. A 3.5-mile trek brought us to a small clearing. At one side was the bench with its bronze plaque marking the 10 acres forever preserved to the memory of the composer and his wife. It was time to rest, to eat, to capture the moment in photography, in conversation, and in silence. Some of us headed back, and the others continued to the last mile to Fern Canyon and Gold Bluff Beach. The sea was very calm, and there, as I sat on the beach, tossing pebbles, gazing toward China, I began to feel and understand a little of the cosmic view, which was so much a part of Bloch's philosophy of life. The incomprehensible dimensions of space and time. I thought of London and Cambridge, 6,000 miles the other way. They might as well have just been on another planet. We would have remained longer except for dusk. As it was, we returned to the campground in pitch darkness, hailed with much relief by the advance party. A blazing campfire lit up the surrounding woods, and a table piled high with all manner of food and drink added to the convivial atmosphere. By some remarkable chance, a radio tuned spontaneously to a San Francisco station and gave forth the first powerful theme of Bloch's sacred service. Everyone held their breath in disbelief. We all settled in various cars and turned on all the radios on the same wavelength, filling the forest with music. It was as if the fates had decided to contribute a fitting and significant conclusion to this memorable event. So, when I read that, I thought, oh, when I go to the Redwoods, I can follow his directions and I'll find the bench. No problem. So, I thought I'd give you a little tour of how to get to that bench in case you would like to go there. So I also went to Orick, which was about 6 miles south, and I went there and got a map. And based on Alexander's description, I put a little heart where I thought the bench would be. So I parked at the visitor center, which is near the bottom, and I got to the fork in the road, which is a little bit there, and I thought, well, I can find the James Irvine Trail. It's just a little bit to the left. But here was the signage. Big tree! And there's a big tree that way, and a very big tree. There were no signs that said Irvine Trail. So I took a wild guess, and I ended up on the wrong trail. And I think it's just so funny that it happened to be called the Carl Knapp Trail, the same last name as Alexander. What are the chances? Well, I hiked up 2.5 miles before I found a sign that finally said where I was, and so I turned around. Altogether, it was 5 miles. I was tired. I went home. Tomorrow's another day. But I wasn't upset because this is what I was seeing as I was hiking. I mean, it's just spectacularly beautiful. That's just one tree right there. And they're so thick all the way up to the top. It's just amazing. The trails are exquisitely maintained. It was really fun. So the next day, I went to the trail and I said, this time I'm going to go the correct way. I went to the sign and went, well, okay, let me try it again. And I found the James Irvine Trail. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go 3.5 miles and then turn toward the ocean. I get to a place that turns toward the ocean, but it wasn't the right way, and I ended up doing an entire circle and going back. I was so close. But again, I wasn't upset because I got to see trees like this. I got to see, this beautiful scenery. So it was okay. Well, the next day, I was there for 9 days, by the way, so I knew I had plenty of time. So I thought, I'm going to go to the visitor center and see what they have to say. So I go there the next day, and in this picture, there's nobody there. But when I was there, it was packed with tourists, and I had to wait an entire hour before I finally got to the front desk. Wow. And talk to the friendly park rangers who truly all smile like that. They're just smiley and friendly. And as you can see, there's plenty of maps around. And I said, could you point out to me where the Ernest Bloch Memorial bench is? And they had no idea. They did apologize for the signage and lack thereof. And I was about to give up when the senior park ranger came along and said, oh, I know what you need. You need the map that has all the benches on it. And I was like, so he opens up this cupboard and there are these 4 big scrapbooks, with the leather thing, and he puts them down and they all have dust, boom, Finally he gets to the 4th one on the very bottom and he opens it up and he goes, I believe that this is what you are looking for. Yes! I see EB plus MB plus V, that means Ernest Bloch plus Marguerite Bloch. Bench. And then to be helpful, he put his pencil there for me. And so I noticed when he did that there was a P with the blue box, that's parking. So I said, well, what if I just parked along that, there and approached it from the ocean side? They said, that should work just fine. Yeah. All you got to do is go out from the visitor center, take the highway, and then do Davison Road, parallel to the coast. Piece of cake. Okay. So they said there's just one problem. Because it's tourist season, you have to have a reservation for that parking lot. And so you have to wait till 5 o'clock. And as soon as somebody leaves, then you can go in. I said, okay. So it just turned out, though, that it wasn't a straight line. It was very curvy. And it was switchback after switchback. And it was drought season. It was so dusty that it looked like snow. And you couldn't tell the difference between the road and the ditch and the road and the ravine on the other side. This was truly what it looked like. It was so dusty. And this was before you got into the trees. When you finally got into the tree section, that was possible. And this went for 7 miles. So 7 miles, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. But finally, the park ranger little booth, and I pull up, and I pulled out my map to make sure I was in the right place. And once again, the friendly park ranger, they always smile. And so I showed them the map with the pencil, and I said, am I in the right place? And they said, yeah, well, I've never seen this kind of map before. Hey, look, look at it. This is really cool. They said, what does EB stand for? And I was like, oh, you wouldn't understand. He's just this composer named Ernest Bloch. Ernest Bloch, I love him. Didn't he write Shalomo? I couldn't believe I'm in the right place. He goes, it's another mile. You have to drive through 3 streams, but don't worry, they're not very deep. You'll and you do have to be out of that parking lot by sundown, or I'm going to lock you in. Okay. Oh, and I'm about to drive off, and he goes, ma'am, sorry, that's $12, cash only. We don't have Wi-Fi out here. I was like, nobody told me it was going to be $12. So I dig through my purse, and I for the grace of God, I happened to have a $10 bill and 2 ones, hand it to them, and that was all. He goes, it's another mile to the parking lot, so I went through stream number 1, and these are actual photographs of the actual stream. Number 2, and number 3, and finally, the parking lot. Oh, yes, I finally made the parking lot. Well, it turned out there was still a half mile before I got to the trailhead. So I get to the trailhead, guess what? 1 more stream to go through, and I went 5 foot. And of course, there's no way they were slippery and slidey, these boards. So of course, I got completely sopping wet. But I finally made it to the other side of the stream, and there's 70 steps that go up 450-foot elevation gate. Oh my God! By the time I got to the top of those stairs, so I'm like, okay. Now both park rangers said it's only 3/4 of a mile. Well, okay, but that 3/4 of a mile was nothing but tree roots, and they were so thick. I mean, you can't just walk over those. You have to like navigate. So I was like, sometimes they were like, hot stuff. Well, and as you might imagine, it was more than 3/4 of a mile. It was actually 1.5 miles, but finally, the bench! I've never been so happy to see a bench. And there it is, in loving memory of Ernest Bloch, musician, and Marguerite Bloch, from their children and grandchildren, June 28th, 1969. Wow. And there is the selfie. So I took, photos from all angles of the bench to get, the 10 acres. There's my backpack completely drenched in sweat, but I was going to have a little picnic. I brought food and everything, but I was so scared. At this point, it was 6:30, and I didn't know when the sun went down, and I didn't want to get trapped in the parking lot. So I just enjoyed it for about 15 minutes, and then I went back through the stream, through the 7 miles. And right as I approached the highway, I saw an elk, so I hopped out of the car and I took a picture of the elk, very auspicious. And so concludes my adventure to get my selfie!
That's great.
Let's welcome John Labrakis to the stage, and he's going to have many wonderful announcements for us.
Wow.
There's one more thing. There we go.
I love the sweat on your face. Work hard for that. Well, thank you. I'm here to tell you about something that Alexander Knapp mentioned. 1880 was the year of birth for Ernest Bloch. That means in 2030, it's time to celebrate his 150th birthday. Wow. And since he was a local resident, we're banding together and having a big celebration here in Newport, Oregon for Ernest Bloch. So yes, it's 4 years away, but I'm letting you know, giving you an early look. It's going to be an international celebration. We're going to invite people from all over the world to come to Newport and be part of it. It will include, as you heard today, talks on Ernest Bloch, on his family, by family members. Lucienne plans to be here. And about his avocations, his photography, a whole discussion of that, agate hunting, mushroom hunting, and so on. Many things that he's done. Just the whole person that he was. I think today was an amazing prelude to that event. It'll be he was born in July, but we're not going to have it in July. It'll be in the fall, October 29th through November 3rd. The same weekend, the Newport Symphony Orchestra will be performing, and they'll have a work by Ernest Bloch as well. Charmaine is head of program committee, planning the event and all the different speakers and presenters that will be here and performers. It will be one of multiple celebrations around the world, so even though we will be celebrating here, there will also be other celebrations in other parts of the world. We don't know yet where they are, because they're not as advanced as we are. So there's a flyer, it tells you more. You could pick that up on the back table. I have extra copies if you would like. If you would like to join in helping make this happen, we would welcome you. Planning any event involves lots of people working together. It could be just greeting people at the event, welcoming them to Newport, or helping in some of the work of getting the word out and marketing and planning events and so on. If you're interested, you just let me know. And the email for me is on the sheet of paper. And I'll be around this afternoon to answer any questions. Also, by the way, this event is sponsored by the Lincoln County Historical Society. So Jeff Syroff is the executive director, and I'm a chair of the committee. As Alexander Knapp referenced it, it's for the sesquicentennial, which is the 150th birthday of Ernest Bloch. The Historical Society has announced something called the Bloch 150 Club, and there's a flyer on that. If you would like to make a contribution of $150 in a year, then you can become a member of the Bloch 150 Club, and we'll be grateful to you for that. I think that's the main thing. So watch for it. Mark your calendars now. 4 years and 4.5 years from now, we'll be getting together. So thank you all, and this is a wonderful afternoon. Thanks to Charmaine.
All right, if my stage crew can move the piano back, and we will enjoy Poems of the Sea by Constance performing. And just one other little note, we do have swag for people who donate 150. We have those posters that I mentioned of the trees that Bloch photographed, and that's your little prize if you donate that amount. And I'll go ahead and say that after Constance's performance of Poems of the Sea, that will be the conclusion of this program. And you are all invited to a reception. There is plenty of food and drink there, including mushroom coffee that in honor of Ernest Bloch's love of mushrooms, as well as mushroom hummus, which has the wild lion's mane and chanterelle in it. Pretty good. So let's welcome Constance and enjoy.
Charmaine. I am so thrilled to be here. I feel like I've learned so much, and it's been just heartwarming. I feel very privileged to honor Ernest Bloch's legacy in this way, and thrilled to have the opportunity to play with the lovely Shauna Keyes and learn some viola, piano music, his compositions. And I'm doubly thrilled to be playing Poems of the Sea for this symposium. I have long loved Bloch's compositions for cello and piano trio, as well as his concerto grosso, but I did not know Poems of the Sea until I heard the Newport Symphony Orchestra play this nearly 3 years ago with my trio mates, Adrienne and Alicia, performing the orchestrated version. So I looked it up afterwards, and I was absolutely smitten with this, anything having to do with the sea, and found that he had originally composed this piece in 1922, Waves, Shanty in the Sea, for piano solo, and then he later scored it for orchestra. And there are just delicious times when life and art intersect so meaningfully, and this is one of those times. Poems of the Sea grabs me viscerally, both as a musician and as a sailor. Bloch inscribed the following quote from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass in the preface of the piano score, which I'd like to read to you now just to set the scene. In cabined ships at sea. In cabined ships at sea, the boundless blue on every side expanding, with whistling winds and music of the waves, the large, imperious waves. And such or some lone bark buoyed on the dense marine, where joyous, full of faith, spreading white sails, she cleaves the ether mid the sparkle and the foam of day, or under many a star at night. By sailors, young and old, haply will I a reminiscence of the land be read, in full rapport at last. Electronics have put one more person out of the job.
And she has brought an entire plate full of her favorite agates that you are more than welcome to take with you if you want. We will see you next year for the Ernest Bloch Legacy